Kia ora and good afternoon. My project is a cultural pedagogical study of Maori cultural practices in Maori medium settings in Aotearoa. The following whakatoki are the driving principles of this Fulbright inquiry project. Ko te reo te tuakiri, ko te reo toku ahure, ko te reo te ora. My language is my awakening, my language is the window to my soul. Sky Father and Earth Mother, and the family of gods, infuse your blessings upon this work. Ko wai ahau, who am I? My pepeha. Ko Angela Palmieri toku inwa. My name is Angela Palmieri. Ko Giocondo Palmieri toku papa. My father's name is Giocondo. Ko Norma Palmieri toku mama. My mother's name is Norma. Taku Tuahine ko Maria Palmieri. My sister's name is Maria. No America, Venezuela, a Italia ahau. I am American, Venezuelan, and Italian. Ko El Avila Temona. El Avila is the mountain. Ko El Guaire Teawa. El Guaire is the river. Noreira Tenakoto, Tenakoto, Tenakoto Katoa. I was born in Caracas, Venezuela. My parents were born in Abruzzo, Italy. I immigrated to the United States when I was 7. I have been a teacher for 16 years, and in 2011 I founded the Spanish Dual Language Immersion Program at John Muir Elementary School in Los Angeles, which now has over 300 students. Approximately 50% of our students are Spanish-speaking Latino, and 50% are English-speaking from many different cultures. The goal of our Spanish Dual Language Immersion Program is for students to be bilingual, bicultural, and biliterate in Spanish by the 12th grade. Our area of need is the development of cultural pedagogy with a focus on the indigenous cultures of Latin America. Indigenous languages encompass a unique vision of life and of the world. Their disappearance would imply a loss of the unique worldview and existence of each community, an important part of humanity. Indigenous cultures teach us that our land is sacred and should be loved, and that all people are connected. Latin American indigenous cultures in Spanish bilingual programs must be methodically taught and incorporated into the curricula. These programs must also embed into the curricula the cultures of the 21 countries of Latin America and their indigenous peoples. The purpose of my project is to document the cultural pedagogy of Maori medium schools to create a guide for U.S. teachers that is focused on Latin American indigenous pedagogy. The goals for my project were to document cultural pedagogical practices in Maori medium school settings and to convert these practices into universal indigenous education strategies, as well as to align Maori medium cultural practices to Latin American indigenous practices. The steps to creating my inquiry project were the following. I visited Maori medium schools and identified cultural pedagogical practices used by teachers, principals, and schools as a whole. The schools that I visited throughout my time in Aotearoa were the following. I interviewed and surveyed Maori medium teachers and principals and identified cultural pedagogical practices used by their schools. I surveyed 276 Maori medium schools in Aotearoa to identify cultural pedagogical practices used by their schools. I reviewed Maori medium research to identify cultural pedagogical practices used by teachers, principals, and schools in Aotearoa. I interviewed John McCaffrey, one of the founding members of the Te Reo Maori Society and lecturer at University of Auckland. I extracted the cultural pedagogical practices used in Maori medium schools in New Zealand, and I placed them onto a website. I described the cultural pedagogical practices observed in Maori medium schools through research, description, photographs, and videos. I provided ideas for the implementation of the Maori cultural pedagogical practices observed in Maori medium schools for Spanish bilingual teachers in the United States. I provided ideas for the implementation of Latin American indigenous cultural pedagogical practices for Spanish bilingual programs in the United States. I separated the Maori cultural pedagogical practices into two categories, the tangible and the intangible. Intangible indigenous practices guide the tangible. They will be the driving principles of the physical or tangible cultural practices. For the purpose of this Fulbright inquiry project, the Maori cultural practices observed in schools have been divided into the physical practices and the spiritual practices. Intangible indigenous practices cannot be described, they must be felt. They are the spiritual side of indigenous cultures. The intangible Maori cultural practices that I observed in Maori medium schools in Aotearoa were the following. The tangible indigenous practices are the physical form of the intangible. The tangible Maori cultural practices that I observed in Maori medium schools were the following. For the purpose of this presentation, I will focus on the tangible cultural pedagogical practices observed in Maori medium schools. The two aspects of Te Ao Māori that I focused on for my project were the Te Reo Māori language and Māori tikanga. The Maori cultural practices that I observed in Maori medium schools that align with Latin American indigenous practices are the following. Culture is embedded in daily practice. In Maori medium school settings, language and culture are inextricably connected. Cultural practice number 1, teaching cultural performing arts, kapahaka. Cultural practice number 2, hakinakina, Maori traditional sports and games, example, kiorahi. Cultural practice number 3, teaching environmental science, Papatuanuku, god of the earth. Cultural practice number 4, moteatea, traditional Maori chants and laments. Cultural practice number 5, karakia, Maori prayers, incantations, or intentions. Cultural practice number 6, embedding whakatoki into daily practice. Cultural practice number 7, Keemu Maori, Maori instructional games. Maori cultural practices that can be used as universal indigenous practices in Spanish bilingual programs in the United States are the following. Korero tara, oral storytelling, waiata songs, moteatea, chants. Decolonization, teaching accurate indigenous histories and culturally responsive pedagogy. Pepeha, identifying a school's geographic belonging. A pepeha is the way one introduces him or herself in Maori. It is your identity and your connections to the land. Schools will often have a pepeha, and children will know theirs from the time they are very young. Integrating indigenous art and music is a crucial component to teaching indigenous culture. It is a way to transmit history, customs, and traditions. These are some examples of art and music instruction observed in Maori medium schools throughout my time in Aotearoa. Tuakanateina is a Maori cultural practice where older students take responsibility for their younger peers. Whare ako in schools. Maori medium schools will separate their grade level units into hubs. These hubs are often given names that reflect a part of the Maori culture. Separation of Te Reo Māori and English. In Maori medium educational settings, the language programs are housed in separate buildings. Whare hui kuramatua are parent meetings that are held about once per term in Maori medium educational settings. Whare hui, or school assemblies, are a Maori cultural practice where students and teachers gather each Monday and Friday to set the intentions for the week. Whare hui, led by tamariki, is when older students in Maori medium school settings call meetings as a group with their teachers to discuss any issue. A noho marae is a week or weekend stay at a marae in order to learn about Maori tikanga. Te Kohangareo is early childhood education in Te Reo Māori that incorporates language, culture, and traditional knowledge. Place-based learning focuses on learning and teaching within the local community of the students, as well as local and indigenous heritage. Kaumatua, elders in the schools, are seen as guardians or kaitiaki of the Maori language and culture. A pōwhiri, a Maori welcoming practice, is used by schools to welcome new students and new staff at the beginning of each term. Ako, reciprocal teaching, describes the teaching and learning reciprocal relationship of students and teachers. Embedding Indigenous literature into the curricula helps pass on the traditions and customs of Indigenous peoples. Indigenous murals in schools are a powerful way of incorporating culture, history, and art in a school's environment. Painting Indigenous murals on school grounds reinforces the message that Indigenous cultures are valued and respected. Learning Te Reo Māori allows Māori students to have more access to Te Ao Māori, or the Māori world. Nā Manu Korero, Māori speech competitions for secondary students, encourage fluency in Te Reo Māori and English. Other Indigenous education recommendations for U.S. Spanish bilingual programs are: it is important that principals and school leaders create a school culture that values the teaching and learning of Indigenous practices. Who are the Indigenous people of Latin America? There are over 650 Indigenous peoples in Latin America. Some of them include the Maya, Aztec, Quechua, Aymara, Guarani, Mapuche, Wayu. This map represents the indigenous languages in Latin America. The larger red circles represent larger indigenous populations. This map depicts the percentages of indigenous populations in each country of Latin America. There are over 557 living indigenous languages in Latin America, and at least 111 of them are on the verge of extinction. My next steps after the Fulbright Distinguished Award in Teaching experience include acquiring a doctorate in Latin American Studies with an emphasis on Indigenous cultures, as well as sharing my Fulbright Inquiry project with bilingual educators. The Indigenous Community Alliances in Los Angeles include Alliance with Academia Semillas del Pueblo, the first Indigenous schools in Los Angeles to teach Nahuatl. Alliance with UCLA, which has mapped out the Indigenous peoples of Los Angeles along with the organizations that serve them. If you would like more information about my project, please visit aotearoa.spanish.wordpress.com. Stay tuned for the website's completion. What will you do with what you have learned from the Maori people in our schools? You have opened the door to our culture, which you will never be able to close again. Now you have to decide how you're going to use that knowledge throughout your journey. Thank you to the schools who welcomed me and treated me like family. You have forever changed my life. Thank you, Eric and his wife, Anne, for being such wonderful advisors and friends. Thank you, Fulbright New Zealand, for this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and for supporting me throughout my time here. Spending almost 6 months in Aotearoa, the land of the long white cloud, has been one of the best experiences of my life. New Zealand is now my second home. Thank you, Tēnā koutou. Thank you very much for coming.